You know, I think it's time that I finally acknowledge that I can only do one useful thing, and that is reading the writings of other people. Or I guess it's only useful to people that want to listen to me. Regardless, with that in mind, I guess we should go over another quickie page together, huh? Today, we'll be going over Chris and science. Science is the systematic study of the natural world through observation and experimentation. Science can be divided into pure science, which studies natural phenomena, and applied science, which finds practical uses for said phenomena. Chris has an on-off history with science, though it is mostly off. His view on science, nature, and technology is utterly warped. He has lost touch with the times and thinks science is much more ahead in certain fields than it actually is, probably due to him getting all of his information through fictional media. He has also mixed up real science, pop science, pseudoscience, and other things he has learned from media and enablers to create a very distorted view of nature. Furthermore, Chris struggles with mathematics and numerical reasoning despite boasting otherwise. His ego has also caused him to reject scientific findings, such as when he rejected the fact that Asperger's syndrome and high-functioning autism are one and the same. Chris on science. Fated moments override numbers. Chris on his views on established scientific data. Chris comes from a scientific background on his father's side. Bob was a scientific man. He worked as a General Electric engineer for a large part of his life. He wanted Chris to be into science too, so he had set up a small workshop where he and young Chris would tinker around. Chris's paternal half-siblings both held STEM doctorates, with one in particular having made a career as an ophthalmologist, and Chris himself has an applied science associate's degree in computer-aided drafting and design. Alas, none of this got Chris deeply interested in science. Chris has stated his opinions on science in his OkCupid questionnaire. He said all types of science are interesting to him, though he finds conversations about science to be boring and annoying. He claims to put equal weight in science and faith and enjoys finding out how things work. All of these, however, should be taken with a grain of salt since he was ready to do anything, including lying, to obtain China. His actual views on pure science are probably low or non-existent since he slept through high school. He may have a positive opinion on computer science due to him being hooked on computers since a very young age. Unsurprisingly, Chris is not interested in engineering. All his engineering marvels are shitty duct tape and Lego creations that a child could also make. Pure science. There are multiple things that are horribly wrong in the Sonichu comics, including a lack of regard for the laws of physics. Documenting all of these would be impossible since each page of the comic has some law being broken. All kinds of wacky things happen in the comics, such as light behaving to the wishes of the great director Chandler. Velocity and acceleration are as random as the lottery. Friction becomes fiction, and hypothetical concepts such as parallel dimensions and portals are everyday occurrences. Normally, these discrepancies from reality could be written off as science fiction, but Chris thinks all of this really happened in some other dimension, and it can be considered as a critique of his scientific knowledge. In real life, since Chris has no real superpowers, he has to play by the rules of physics, but he maintains an unending belief in unproven concepts. Most of these beliefs can be traced back to fictional media he likes, such as Who Framed Roger Rabbit and Futurama for the multiple dimensions, and Rick and Morty to prove that there are other people who can traverse dimensions. Chris again attempted to bend the laws of physics in February of 2021, having plans to use piezoelectricity on his quartz crystals in order to open up a portal to complete the dimensional merge. Chris has discussed this with Kyle, to which he explains to Chris why this wouldn't work, and how the article he is citing does not provide evidence of his claims. Chemistry. Chris had two gal pals as partners in his chemistry lab. Not much else is known of his views on chemistry, though he probably has low opinions about it due to the rote nature of chemistry and him being a lazy bum. Biology. Chris's history with biology is well documented due to him torturing his body by ramming all sorts of things into holes where they don't belong, while also torturing biologists by making ungodly anatomical drawings of electric hedgehog Pokemon and shitty morphological drawings of humans. Applied science. Computer science. Out of all of the sciences, Chris is probably best at computer science. Like most people born during or after the 1980s, he has been around computers since his childhood. He took some computer upgrade classes in PVCC, and he bragged to Casey's dad that he's technologically inclined. He coded most of his websites by hand using text editors, as opposed to using purpose-built HTML editors that do the heavy work for him. He knows a bit about older computers like the Commodore 64 due to his age and nostalgia. Engineering. Bob tried to get Chris interested in engineering since Chris was young, to no avail. Though Chris had made a few inventions, such as a case for holding 2 Apple products and a case for holding Pokemon cards, the raw materials Chris has used are limited to Crayola Model Magic, Legos, and duct tape. Due to his new interest in cosplaying, he has started making some accessories to go along with the costume. When he cosplayed as Chris from Pokemon Crystal for BronyCon 2019, he tried to make a Pokegear. Instead of using proper professional materials, he opted to use Crayola model magic. Medicine. Medicine is a field of applied human biology that helps in keeping a person's health in check. Chris has incredibly poor mental, physical, and social health. Another problem he creates is by self-medicating and relying on unlicensed people. He did go to a doctor on occasion for his physical health checkups, but refused to go to a proper mental health counselor and went to his church's pastoral counselor instead. Recently, he has put in an effort to improve in all fields, but nowhere near what is required to make him a fully functional human being. Pseudoscience. Astrology. Chris has almost never spoken about astronomy, though he has talked about astronomy's retarded older sibling, astrology. Chris has, for a long time, told others about his and his creation zodiac signs, proving that he has some belief in it. He has mentioned in an IRC chat that he reads his horoscope daily, and in his February 2012 Facebook post, posted in detail about his interpretation of his horoscope. In his OkCupid questionnaire, he considered astrology to be a legitimate science. Magic. Chris is shown to have a belief in magic many times. The most notable example is the belief that he had the power to curse people. Magic stones. A subset in his beliefs in magic, Chris has started purchasing and wearing various semi-precious stones which supposedly mentally calm and heal him. He also purchased an $80 water bottle with some rocks in it which also help him accomplish the same. Subliminal frequency self-help audio. Subliminal frequency hypnosis videos are sets of audio on YouTube consisting of binaural beats, claiming to help listeners do things such as reduce body odor, turn a penis into a vagina, and to make your ass fatter and stomach thinner without having to do any actual work, all of which are claims without any sort of real evidence to their effectiveness. Chris started watching these in 2016 in an attempt to speed up his gender transition. This culminated in Chris slicing his taint open because he believed that watching these videos caused a vagina to grow inside him. Despite risking his health from doing so, he continued to follow them, this time in an attempt to develop psychic powers. Of all of the videos he's watched, only the ass fattening one has truly worked, and not through his own means. Numerology. Chris has seemed to develop a fixation towards numerology, which became especially prevalent in several jail letters. Chris has on several occasions written the penultimate digit in the year 2022 backwards so the twos resemble a heart. Mathematics. I excelled in math too, for the love of God! Chris, on his Wikipedia page. Mathematics, math or maths for short, is the study of quantity, numbers, and space. As with many autistics, Chris displays a fascination with numbers, but despite his claimed honor roll status, he has a weak grasp on the subject. There are countless examples of his mathematical errors, including arithmetical errors, as well as quantity, measurement, weight, and time. Chris has stated on at least one occasion that his math education goes all the way up to college trigonometry, which shows that at some point he's also learned at least some college-level algebra and geometry, as they are both prerequisites of a typical trigonometry course. He has bragged to Julie about how he's a pretty good math genius. He claims he received A's in his math classes. However, he hasn't used his supposed talent to his advantage by getting a job in a technical field. On his Wikipedia page, he cited his mathematical talent as proof that he should have received an award at graduation. In Mumble 2, he said he got into a car crash while doing math in his head. Arithmetic. Quickville's currency is made up of C quarters and W quarters. According to the Sonichu canon, 10 C quarters make up a single W quarter, which makes no sense. A quarter is 1/4 of its respective unit. When a clerk told Chris he was $2 short of affording his junk food, he was left dumbfounded as to what he should do. Another customer in line gave Chris $2 to make up the deficit, and instead of handing it to the clerk to pay off his debt, Chris simply took that money, the food, and left the store over everyone's protest. According to Chris, if he lived in Equestria, he'd be 1,050 years old, because 1 year in Equestria is equal to 30 Earth years, while Nightstar is 19 years old in human years, but 570 in pony years. Because Chris has this fixation for his birth date, he decided to give her the birth date, 24th of February 1982, which is apparently pony year 967. Only checking after he's made this statement, Chris did the math to confirm this. In a later Facebook post, Chris stated that 30 out of 365.25 Earth days is equal to 11 Earth days for each birthday. In reality, 30 divided by 365.25 is approximately 8/100ths. Even more pathetic is how he wrote the quotient as divided 30 by 365 instead of the other way around, and still got it wrong, as 365.25 divided by 30 is equal to 12.175, which cannot be rounded down to 11. In his flawed math though, he had found that her actual birth date in pony years should be the 19th of February 939. In Sonichu number 10, the 4-cent garbage.com tower collapses with 1,500 people in it. According to Chris, 500 were perfectly unharmed, 250 were too drunk to escape on their own, 125 of these trolls managed to get out alive with help from sober trolls, while 125 of the drunk trolls were hurt, injured, or killed. 125 sober trolls were hurt, injured, or killed. 250 others were injured, 150 others were safe but hurt, and 100 were killed. Not only are we left in the dark about what happened to the 125 drunk troll casualties, but this total also only accounts for 1,375 people. Something tells me we might just have a conspiracy on our hands. Estimation and measurement. When exercising by lifting 2 boxes of 12-pack lemonade, he estimated that the 4.26 liters of lemonade he was lifting weighed about 50 pounds, when in fact it weighed less than 10. In the chairlifting video, Chris claimed the chair he was lifting weighed a grand number of pounds. Chris repeatedly claims to have D-cup breasts. In his breast massage video, Chris measures his chest and underbust as 44 and 40 inches respectively, and says they make him a D-cup. In reality, he is a B-cup. Also, the conventional method for breast measurement does not work for trans women, mainly because of chest girth, so Chris is actually closer to an A-cup. In the infamous father call, Chris seemed to believe a doghouse made of plastic and wood weighed 5 to 10 tons, approximately 10,000 to 20,000 pounds, and was heavier than any tombstone, which tend to weigh an average of about 80 pounds. Essentially, Chris believes that plastic and wood would weigh more than solid stone. After walking 8 miles to and from the post office, Chris vastly underestimated the entire journey to have only been 2 miles. Chris has tried to describe a number of everyday things like love and respect using all kinds of scales and numbers. His most famous example, the heart level, measures his emotional state. Another example, the scale of respect is meant to be used to measure Chris's respect for certain individuals. In one of Chris's early maps of Quickville, the dimensions of its sectors and divisions are clearly out of scale. Even with Chris's reassurance that his CADD skills are at play, it's pretty easy even for a child to point out the errors in his judgment. What are you talking about? That looks like any map I've ever used. In Sonichu number 10, Black Sonichu is supposed to spin dash at 200 rotations per minute, which is supposed to mean that he does it at high speeds. This actually roughly translates to 3 per second. Chris claims his calls from Central Virginia Regional Jail are limited to 10 minutes. Recording of full calls, however, show that the actual limit is 15 minutes. Algebra. Planet Dolan artist Vim Homless made a post joking about how butts are greater than water, to which Chris misunderstood as, taking the greater symbol to mean less than, water is more than butts. Considering the post was made by a porn artist, and one which Chris follows no less, it is more than shocking to see that he couldn't have made this connection. 2 days after that post was made, Chris made another response to 2D animator Spinal Palm, in which he says that salted butter is better than unsalted butter. This time around, Chris actually understood the underlying message and agreed with Spinal Palm about the topic, meaning that he must have figured out the meaning of the greater than symbol after several other users corrected him. Geometry. In one of his tirades towards the Xbox, Chris said that the angle of a half circle is 120 degrees, then revised his claim to 130 degrees. Number systems. Chris's reports of how much Cherokee blood he has have been inconsistent. When he emailed Jackie, he stated that he was 1/16th Cherokee, but he later told Regina that he is 1/32nd Cherokee. Finally, when talking to Emily, he claimed that Bob was at least 1/4 Cherokee, which would make Chris at least 1/8 Cherokee, not 1/16 or 1/32nd. To avoid assigning an unlucky number to his Nightstar comic, Chris decided to number the comic as Sonichu number 12-9, using an M dash in place of a decimal point. This could make sense if it referred to the 9th part of the issue, but Chris clearly intends it as a fractional amount of almost 13. Statistics and probability. Chris coined the term infinitely high boyfriend factor, the probability that a woman he is trying to latch onto isn't single, in which he claims he doesn't hate only 1/4 billionth of all males. And shit, that's that for that page. Let's move on to the next one, CADD. When Chris still attended church, one of the churchgoers had connections with a business that did a lot of CADD work and told him to submit his resume. You know, the shit he went to school for and is so unbearably proud of. Well, his excuse later was the business was too far from him. At most, maybe 20 minutes away. CADD stands for Computer Aided Drafting and Design. It is a college degree which provides career development in the use of computers to create and analyze designs. For Chris, however, this degree has provided no real-world benefits whatsoever, other than giving him something else to brag about to boyfriend-free girls. Chris graduated from Piedmont, Virginia Community College with an Associate in Applied Science degree and a CADD certificate in May of 2006. Chris admitted in his call with Casey's father that he entered the CADD program without knowing what kind of job such a certificate could get him. Throughout his years at PVCC and in the years since graduating, he still hasn't bothered to figure it out. If Bob were still among us and Barbara still cared about anything, they'd be kicking themselves for wasting money on his tuition. CADD at PVCC was designed as a 2-year degree, but it took Chris 5 years to complete it, not including the year at which he was suspended from college. The CADD certificate itself only requires 4 courses, or 1 semester of work. The remaining credit requirements were to be met with major related requirements and a few general education classes. Chris would have needed extensive consultation with his advisor in the CADD program. In addition to this advising, Chris had at his disposal 2 CADD labs, a career services department, web-posted job openings, and links to relevant external sites. None of this could overcome Chris's general apathy and confusion about entering the world of work. Despite the inordinate amount of time it took Chris to obtain this degree, and the amount that Chris talks about it, he only ever produced 2 pieces of work. While one might assume that they were 2 large projects produced over a long amount of time, the 2 designs he produced were a map of his mall and an incredibly large mayor's office about the size of a football field with nothing much inside it. The mall contains a 2-story Pokemon Center and numerous stores where one can buy and play with games and toys, as well as restaurants that most likely sell junk food. The mayor's office is supposed to be in the mall, but it is nowhere to be found in this diagram. The cyclopean structure contains several rooms over 100 feet long containing very few objects, with a table around 20 feet in length in the middle. It contains few doors for a building of its size, and some hallways are fully inaccessible. Chris claims that he received an A+ for these projects, which took him weeks to months to complete. However, he has also admitted indirectly that one of his CADD professors, Dr. Keen C.U. Minoru, gave him a failing grade at some point. Typically, Chris would only assume that this criticism was completely unjustified and that Dr. Minoru was entirely malicious. Dr. Minoru would appear as the CADD chef in Sonichu No. 5, which Chris was drawing in the month of his graduation. The associate's degree in CADD is no longer offered by Piedmont, Virginia Community College. As time goes on, computer design programs evolve, and it's more economical to learn how to craft as part of another major, such as engineering, machining, digital media, or product design. Simply majoring in CADD nowadays is like majoring in Microsoft Word. Additionally, Chris was trained on Windows XP era software that has been obsolete for ages, and he has made virtually no effort to keep up with the new developments in his field of study. This has left Chris with very few job prospects he wouldn't have gotten with any other AA. Usage in the comics. Chris's CADD degrees apparently come into use within his comics. He even alludes to them assisting him at many points in his comic. For example, Sonichu and Rosechew's Benefit House. However, the few basic measuring skills he may have picked up from his CADD courses seem to have been forgotten, because he never uses a ruler, nor are his drawings to scale. Additionally, he doesn't use a computer for anything but text, making his CADD degree entirely inconsequential in the production of his comic. In fact, he was firmly against using computers for art until 2020. Obviously, a college course is not required to be able to make basic measurements or draw things relatively proportional to each other. When you consider his lack of improvements over the last 20 years, he'd probably have been better off spending Bob's tuition money on Lego blocks. Chris petulantly inserted Dr. Minoru into the comic as a villain by the name of CADD Chef, who mocks Chris's designs for his mall. This injustice guaranteed CADD Chef a place in the private villa of corrupted citizens as one of Mary Lee Walsh's minions. And would you look at that, another page completed. Let's move on to the next one, Chris and electronics. Chris has had a long, arguably addictive relationship with electronics, yet he sometimes still struggles with their basic operation and maintenance. His most important tool is arguably his computer. His window to the world, Chris uses it to connect to the internet, to talk with his fans, and to promote his way of life. Needless to say, just like everything else he owns, Chris manages to ruin it in some way, going through several over the years. Origins. It's no secret that autistic people can excel when put behind a mouse and keyboard. Chris, the autistic challenge that he was introduced to computers as a toddler by his technically inclined father. According to Chris, Bob led him into the digital world with a Commodore 64. In 2018, Chris, feeling nostalgic, dug out said Commodore 64 and requested help from his fans to repair it. While Chris's ludicrous claim that he started playing on the computer at 6 months is obviously false, he definitely started structuring his life around computers at a very young age and has never viewed reality without the filter of a PC. Chris would go on to major in CADD, combining his artistic interest with his attachment to the tool that made his saga possible. He dabbled in HTML after taking a relevant college course, surely feeling like an accomplished computer scientist in the process. Chris's equipment. Antique technology. Chris has had experience with older bits of technology. In a tweet from the 1st of June 2021, he discussed his early childhood. Part of the tweet mentioned that the Chandler family owned a capacitance electronic disc player, which was a failed early 80s video format that worked in a similar fashion to vinyl records, but used plastic caddies for storage and loading the discs into the player. Chris still had the CED machine as late as 2005. It can be seen in a photo of himself taken around that time. The CED player was probably destroyed in the 2014 house fire. Chris has also had a lengthy history with the CED's more successful competitor, VHS cassettes, having grown up when it was the dominant home video format, prior to the rise of an eventual supplanting by DVDs in the early 2000s. Much of the available footage we have of Chris prior to the mid-2000s came from videotapes. The videos on the Yep, I'm on TV DVD were transferred off of deteriorated VHS tapes, including both of his TV appearances. The photos were most likely scanned with a desktop scanner, and the quality of that scanner is so low that rainbow streaks are present on most sides. Chris also had a sizable collection of softcore porn recorded on videotape. Chris is shown in Chandler Family Christmas 2004 attempting to get his father to choose between a DVD or a dubbed bootleg VHS of Fraggle Rock. In August 2016, Chris attempted to sell his copy of Disney's Aladdin for a whopping $3,000 under the incorrect guise that Black Diamond Disney tapes were worth a lot of money. In reality, this is only the price that some sellers are asking for. It's highly unlikely people are spending that much on ultra-common tapes that can be found at thrift stores for 50 cents. In Chris's third house tour, recorded on the 9th of March 2018, he shows off boxes with old VHS tapes in them, saying that they belong to Mr. C. These are likely the remaining VHS tapes in his collection that weren't lost in the house fire. In August 2018, Barb threw out a number of Chris's old VHS tapes alongside his classic t-shirt. Chris, in response, abused and humped a pillow effigy representing Barb in front of her. It is unknown if Bob's VHS tapes were part of the dumping, but it's probably unlikely. Chris has a retro-themed Sonichu called VHS. Desktop computers. As of 2010, Chris used his family's HP Pavilion desktop computer located in his kitchen. It ran Windows XP, had a scanner and a printer, or perhaps a scanner-printer combo, that allowed him to scan comic pages and print artwork, and had a version of Adobe Photo Deluxe installed on it, which Chris primarily used to type in text bubbles for his comics or to alter the truth. Since he had been able to connect to Mumble voice chats and efficiently watch YouTube videos, it was presumed that Chris's computer also had a broadband internet connection, which was slightly rarer in rural areas at the time, but not unheard of. Damn, that was kinda hard to say. Laptop computers. An August 2011 video, however, revealed that Chris had a new computer loaded with Windows 7. Another video confirmed it to be a hand-me-down HP laptop. Chris claimed that he had upgraded it, but further details are unknown. The laptop also has Mozilla Firefox and iTunes installed on it. Most of Chris's computers appear to have survived the fire, including his laptop and his upstairs PC, although some data was lost. Chris used his iPhone to communicate with his fans on Facebook and upload videos to YouTube during his year of exile. The rental house apparently had a computer and an internet connection, so it is possible that Chris used that as well. As of 2017, Chris owns an Asus gaming laptop that he used for live drawing streams and to play Steam. Mobile computers and smartphones. From at least the early 2010s, Chris had been a loyal user of the iPhone. In 2013, he built the Idea bookcase to hold his iPhone 5 and 2 iPod Touches he'd switch out for different content. He used the iPhone for anything requiring cell service, and the iPods for media and light computing. As of 2018, Chris has 2 identical iPhones, one for business and the other for personal calling. He most likely can afford the deal because phone companies regularly offer buy one get one specials on new units. In May 2020, Chris got an iPad and stylus to attempt digital art. Computer troubles. To hear Chris tell it in 2010, his computer was on its last legs. In his conversations with Alec Benson Leary, Chris complained that multiple power outages resulting from blackouts in his area had disabled his computer for days at a time, forcing him to restore it constantly. In mid-February 2010, this was his excuse for failing to regularly upload new comic pages. When Alec reasonably asked him why he didn't just buy a new, more reliable computer, Chris claimed that he didn't have the money. A low-end replacement for his machine, powerful enough for his purposes, would have only cost a few $100s, but apparently Chris had better things to buy. Chris often claimed to be unable to upload videos for Jackie or chat with her via instant message because he couldn't get his computer to start up. This caused him much stress and discomfort because he worried that she would feel that he was neglecting her and would break up with him. Chris complained that he didn't have the money for a new PC, but all the while continued to buy new video games for his second PS3. To make things worse, Chris revealed that there was a second working PC in the house, and the only reason he didn't attempt to use it is that it was blocked by a pile of clothes, which, incidentally, was the same excuse he used for not showering. Computer literacy. Despite having taken a course in computer construction, Chris did not know the difference between RAM and hard drive space. When confronted about forgetting things so often, he claimed that his memory worked like RAM, believing the random in RAM means that it only works some of the time, or randomly, despite the fact it almost means the exact opposite, that it can access any requested piece of information at any time, regardless of order. Taser. Chris believed that he could shock his quartz crystals through the use of the phenomenon of piezoelectricity to create portals. He believed he could use a taser to shock some of his magic stones as a means to starting the dimensional merge. And would you look at that? I read through every single article that I had set out to do, so I guess that's going to be the end for today's video. I hope you learned something today. If nothing else, give your brain a nice little massage, encourage it to absorb as much as possible. If you like what I do, leave a comment, rate, and subscribe. If you want to support me in a more personal way, you can check out the Patreon link and the Teespring link in the description. I've got more content coming down the pipeline. But until then, I'll see you degenerates next time.